Hello and welcome to Responsible Government Contracting. This workshop is part 3 of a 3-part series introducing government contracting. Today, Mr. Andy Bennett will discuss responding to requests with winning proposals. Thank you, and find us on the web at nc-rgc.com.
Wonderful. So today, like I said, we're going to talk about part 3, and that's that how do you actually respond? And this is as much art as it is science. So
Okay.
we're going to remember who we're talking to. Today we're going to talk about who the audience is, who the who the folks are that we're writing to. Couple of different types of responses: RFQs, requests for quotes, versus RFPs, requests for proposals. And we're going to remember that process that we talked about last time. So how we go through that pre-solicitation, the market research, the request for information, sources sought, and then we go down to the RFQ and the RFP phase for the formal response. So we're going to review all that today, and then we'll dive in and take a look at a couple real ones and win you some contracts.
All right. Awesome.
All right. So let me fast forward here to part 3, and we'll have some story time. So I like to start out with real life here. So I had a client several years ago, about four years ago now, that brought me in after the fact because they were very, very frustrated that they had lost a proposal. They had lost a bid. And this is one of those huge IDIQs, indefinite delivery, indefinite quantity. When we talk about the Amazon.com, when you get the permission to be on Amazon, you don't get any orders with that. There's no revenue with that, but you get permission to be on Amazon.com, and then people can place orders. So that kind of contract, that kind of IDIQ. And they're saying they spent, upwards of $200,000-$300,000 on the proposal development because this was a $50 billion contract vehicle. This is a bank account that has $0 in it, but has a ceiling and authorization up to $50 billion. So big deal for them. It'd be a big deal for any company, right?
Yes.
So what the frustration was the compliance that we're going to talk, some of the things we're going to talk about today.
Okay.
And the response that they submitted at the end of the day, the package that they emailed to the contracting officer as their formal bid, was 165 pages. That document was 165 pages.
Wow.
Which I've done proposals that are, upwards of 500 pages. So that in and of itself is not that's not surprising. Especially for something that complex, something that big.
Yeah.
The challenge was that the instructions to offerers stated the proposal would not exceed 150 pages.
Oh, wow.
So what that means is the contract officers get the proposal, it's 165 pages, they lop off the last 15 pages of the proposal, and that's all they consider. That's the only thing that's under evaluation. Unfortunately for this company, they had important content in those last 15 pages that was not considered because it exceeded the page limit. So the attention to detail, that's going to be the theme for today when we start talking about that, because the big guys make those kinds of mistakes too. And this was a medium-sized company, so they were not a new guy on the street. They submitted a non-compliant proposal. So unfortunately, but good news, every cloud has silver lining. So that lesson is, something that you don't have to do. So we're going to use that as kind of our case study today. All right. So just as a reminder, like I said, every class, every workshop here, the 4 legs of the table, these are the folks that these are the ones that we're actually talking to. So the audience, just like if you're doing public speaking, this is the audience. These are the people who you're speaking to in the proposals.
Gotcha.
You're not verbalizing, you're not actually communicating with them, but for the written word. So
Gotcha.
the pricing piece, the technical response, the business volume, all of this stuff, you have to both speak to the subject matter expert in that area who knows a lot, the government employee who knows as much as you do about
Hmm.
that line of work, and they are the subject matter expert. So you have to speak technical, you have to speak details, you have to speak their language. That's their love
Right.
language, right? So that's that operational side. How are you going to do the job? While also speaking to the contracting officer. And again, remember that contracting officer's love language is risk. So are you going to approach this and do a good job? Are you going to do something that's very risky to the government where
Right.
you're at risk of default? Are you are you thinking through all of the different assumptions? What are those assumptions? What are your risk mitigation plans? What is your communication plan? All of those types of things. That's where the contracting officer is going to come in. The art and the science of this is how do you weave those together
Right.
and speak to both of those audiences through that document, right? So that's the art of proposal writing. And remember the silly hats that were when we were talking about this.
Hmm.
So the proposal process, remember the top line here is where the government's going out and doing their shopping. They don't know, they have an idea of what they're going to buy, but they don't know quite what exactly they're going to buy.
Mm.
So they're doing that shopping around up front, the pre-solicitation phase.
Yep.
And then down below is what we're talking about today. This is where, okay, they've done their shopping around. They know the details. They know exactly what it is. They've even done maybe a draft RFP. They've posted for everybody to read what that request for proposal is going to look like. Then they come back and they say, okay, here's the final. We're gonna post this this request for proposal. And that's where we now have a document that we can look at, and most of the time they'll allow for questions. This is that red line where you do not call the contracting officer anymore. You certainly do not call the end user anymore.
Hmm.
All questions, all communications are formal. You send, sir, ma'am, I have a question regarding XYZ solicitation. Here's my question, right? And that contracting officer will respond to everybody so that everybody has fair information at the same time. Remember, we talked about last time when you're looking for opportunities, that market research, request for information, sources sought phase, that's where the contracting officer is doing their shopping around, but they're
Hmm.
not just shopping the product or service. They're also, and sometimes more so, looking for small businesses that can provide that product or service.
Okay.
Because remember that small business requirement is very much in your favor with federal contracting. They have
Yeah.
that 23% requirement for total small business, then the 5% for 5% for minority owned, 5% for women owned, 3% for veteran owned, 3% for hub zone. Now, since we're talking about responses today, the responses for pre-solicitation for any of these in the green box, the responses for this typically is your capability statement as that cover sheet. All right, so that's page 1. And then the contracting officers will often have 4 or 5, sometimes even 10 questions that they're looking for. That's where they're doing their shopping around. One of those questions, I promise you, is going to be, name of your business, point of contact, that kind of stuff.
Hmm.
Another question is going to be, what is your small business status or category? And that's where you tell them, I'm a total small business, I'm a minority owned company, I'm an 8A certified company, I'm a woman owned certified company. That's where that, you want to make sure you highlight that. And then there's going to be some technical questions. They're not looking for a full-blown proposal here. They're not looking for pricing either.
Mm.
it's critical to pay attention to these though. And I see some companies just, it's not worth my time to respond to the RFI. They're not going to award off the RFI, so I'm not going to waste my time. I take the opposite approach because and I've seen numerous times, the contracting officers will get an RFI. They will post an RFI. They will get responses. They will get industry companies to respond to that RFI, and that email list of the companies who have actually responded are the only ones going forward that get any sort of communication. So if you're only looking on sam.gov or one of the websites for that, and you notice that RFI, but you don't respond to it because you think that it's going to move forward, and Andy said it's going to go down to that solicitation phase, it's going to be an RFP. I'll just catch it on the RFP. Well, maybe, and the contracting officers have the authorization, maybe they just post the RFP to those few companies that showed interest during the RFI, and they responded to the RFI. So now you don't even know it ever moved forward, and you've lost the opportunity to actually bid on the job because you didn't respond to the RFI.
Right.
So the RFI is 80% going to be exactly the same. You do that capability statement one time, you have that as your cover sheet, and now you've got page 1 done for any RFI responses. What I typically do is have a company letterhead, your logo, whatever your typical kind of format, formal letterhead is, have the questions that they ask, the 5-10 questions that they ask for the RFI. Say question, boom, boom, boom. Here's what the government says, and then indent under that what your response is. Question number 2. Here's what the government, and use their own words. Don't rephrase it. Use their own words. Boom. Here's your question. Here's my response. Here's your question. Here's my response. Maybe that's 4 or 5 pages. Maybe that's 3 pages. It's not a whole lot of effort because that's maybe a paragraph or 2 for each of those responses, and 2 or 3 of those responses are going to be gimmies because that's your company name, contact information, small business status, right?
Right.
So I definitely recommend the responding to the pre-solicitation stuff.
Okay.
Getting more complicated, we start getting into the solicitation phase here. So separate from RFIs. So set RFIs aside. Now we're just and set RFQs aside, because typically an RFQ, request for quote, is like what we would think of like an invoice or a bill of lading or something like a shopping list.
Pricing, so it's pricing sheet, right?
Right, a pricing sheet, absolutely. Item 1, quantity 10, unit price, $15. Here's the total for that line. Item 2, boom, 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 total bottom line, $1,000 total bid. That is a quote, right? So when they ask for a request for quote, that's typically what they're asking for. So pretty straightforward, not a whole lot of response involved. You've got to do the pricing, but that's an RFQ. So we're going to set that aside. Request for proposal is when it gets a little messy. So in the request for proposal, and we're gonna look at what this actually looks like, but typically what the government, so they'll have the series of documents, and they'll provide all that government information. The response that they're looking for is going to be format. They're going to tell you, I want to see volume 1, volume 2, volume 3.
Gotcha.
Don't get hung up on the words they use though, because they may call it chapter 1, chapter 2, chapter 3, section 1, section 2, section 3. Same intent. And volume 1 for them may be technical. Volume 2 for them may be past performance. I've seen some larger proposals that have 6 volumes. So it depends on what the contracting officer is feeling. This is very, very common. So that's why I'm using this as my example. So volume 1, business section, that's when they're asking for you to tell your story. This is your elevator pitch. This is you talking about your company benefits, your program management structure, your financial stability. These are those types of things. And that section is going to be, be efficient with this. So that section is going to be pretty common from proposal to proposal.
Mm.
That isn't going to change a whole lot if you're bidding on this job versus that job. So don't reinvent the wheel. Don't rewrite it every single time. So, become efficient at that. The next volume 2. This is self-explanatory, so technical. If the business volume is telling the current tense, this is the now, this is the present tense. We are a business that has a financial stability with boom, boom, boom. We are a company that has a 401k plan. We are a company that has, program managers that are PMP certified. That's the present tense in volume 1. Volume 2 is future tense. Our team will approach, will attack, will complete, will fulfill this job, this effort by doing this. These are the steps this is our communication plan. This is how we're going to approach this. We plan to have a kickoff meeting where all stakeholders will be included. We will provide monthly status reports. We will, this is the future tense of how you are going to approach, how you are going to attack this specific effort. And this is where you can start to weave in the art. Based on our experience on previous jobs of similar complexity, our program management team will assign an on-site task lead. That on-site task lead will conduct a daily stand-up or a status meeting with the end user, with the technical point of contact. Okay. We find that prevents, or that is a proactive measure to address concerns of the government in real time. Right. So you're using you're not saying, yeah, I did that for Johnny down the street and it was $1 million. That's past. We're going to talk about that in a second. You're using the lessons learned to apply to this job, to this effort, and you're showing both the end user, who's going to be worried about the boots on the ground, detail, getting the job done, and the contract officer, that what you're talking about. You have a plan. You've been there, done that, got the t-shirt. You understand what it is that you're doing. Okay. So you're weaving that technical approach in with your plan specific to this job, with your experience of how you've seen this before, and you're comfortable with the complexity of the job that they're putting in front of you. All right. Gotcha. Volume 3 is past performance. Self-explanatory, and we're going to talk about this in a little bit more detail, but past performance is just as it sounds. What have you done like this before to show that you know what you're talking about? You're speaking to the contracting officer here, because contract officers are skittish by nature. They're very risk averse. They don't like to take chances on newbies, right? They want to know that you've done this before. They want to see that you've done this type of thing before, and they want to, they want examples of where you've done this before. So we'll talk about this and some, hey, I've not done this before, so how do I get started? So we'll talk about that a little bit also. What you're not seeing here specifically called out is price. So sometimes that will be a separate volume. More often than not, they will include pricing in the business volume. Okay. And often price is unlimited page count, because they don't want, they want you to be super specific on your pricing. The type of job, and that is much in detail for today's conversation. But depending on the type of the contract, if they're going to award a firm fixed price contract where they're buying a pencil and they don't want, they want to pay the $5 and they don't want to worry about, you making the sausage, they want to just pay for the pencil and get the pencil. That's firm fixed price. Whereas if they want to do like a time and material or a cost type contract, then they want to get into the weeds more. So that's more involved. So that pricing section can be, pretty straightforward, or it can be very, very involved. Okay. So like I was saying, this is as much art as it is science. And in that technical volume, in that business volume, you are let me tell you another example here. So I've done proposals with Fortune 100 companies that have that rent out entire conference rooms for large conference rooms for the proposal effort, for the actual proposal capture effort. And what they will do is they will line the entire wall, all four walls of that room, with bulletin boards.
Mm.
And they will put each individual page of the proposal on the wall. And they will have, and you may have seen this if you ever looked at comic books as a kid, or you've seen how Hollywood kind of makes a movie. It's called storyboarding.
Yeah.
They will take, just like a comic book, and they will take different sections. Okay, what is that picture that we're trying to paint for that contracting officer? What is that we're trying to convey? What is that we're trying to tell to the contracting officer? Okay, here's the storyboard. Here's the process that we're trying to walk them through. Because again, you're talking to both the end user, who really, really knows what they're talking about from a technical standpoint, and you're talking to that contracting officer who's higher level, but looking at it from a risk perspective. So that painting a picture, telling a story, those are just kind of good ways to remember you're talking to human beings, but you're also competing, and you've got to convey that you know what you're talking about.
Correct.
Okay. So let's shift gears now to that volume 3, past performance. Past performance is this pro tip here, piece of advice. If you don't have this, I highly recommend starting it. What I do for my clients, and what I do, I drink my own Kool-Aid here. I do this for myself. Just like any business coach, or just like any professional coach is going to tell you, update your resume as you go. Don't wait until you need your resume to remember what you did 15 years ago to add those bullets out. Update your resume as you go. For past performance, the second or third thing that I do in the process, anytime I get an award, or any of my clients get a contract award, is I go to that Word document that is just a running document. It's a live document. And I have a section for each contract. And when they get a new award, I add a section to their, running document, and say, okay, boom, we got a new award. Here's the contract number. Here's the period of performance. Here's the contract value. Here's the statement of work. Here's the points of contact. So all of those details that are there for that contract, in a page or less snapshot of the contract. And then as you do work, as you get delivery orders and incremental funding, or as you go through that work, add to those details, add to that narrative.
Okay.
Because you're going to need that here. What the past performance section is going to look like when the government tells you, section past performance, they're going to say similar size and scope. What does that mean? If you're in construction and you're building a 100-story skyscraper building, that's the job that you're bidding on. They don't want to know when you built a shack out in grandma's backyard. They want to know when you've built 110-story buildings, 90-story buildings, 100-story buildings. They may think it's nice that you built a 100,000 square foot warehouse, but that's different, right? So it's construction, but it's not quite similar size and scope. Great if you build a 4-story building, but it's not similar size, right? So that similar size and scope, they want to make sure that they're comparing apples to apples, and that the past performance examples that you're giving, that you're using, are relevant to the project that you're going to be doing, right? And
Right.
that's, again, speaking the love language of the contracting officer, because they're the ones that are worried about risk,
Right. Right.
right? They want to make sure that you know what you're talking about. Relevant and recent. So this, I like to think about this as a bullseye. Relevant.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, let's do recent first. So recent is typically defined as within the past 3 to 5 years.
Okay.
So they want to know jobs that you've done. They want to know projects that you've done recently, within the past 5 years at least, right? Usually
Mm-hmm.
within the past 3 to 5 years. And this is where, whether you've been a subcontractor or a prime, they want to know that you've done it recently or have ongoing projects, right? So that's recent, that qualifies. Relevant. If you are bidding on a job for Army Corps of Engineers, Charleston office, the Charleston district office, well, the center of that bullseye is if you've done work for the Army Corps of Engineers Charleston office previously,
Mm-hmm.
because that is relevant to that customer, because it's, you speak their language, their lingo, how they talk, you are in that circle. That's the center of that bullseye.
Yep.
You've not done work for the Charleston district office, but you've done work for the Army Corps of Engineers, maybe Jacksonville or California or somewhere else. Okay. It's not center of the bullseye, but it's close, right? So you're next level out. You've not done work for the Army Corps of Engineers, but you've done work for NAVFAC, for the Navy Facilities Command. Okay. It's not the Army, but it's next level out, right? So
Mm-hmm.
continue to think about that. So you've not done work for the military, but you've done work for Department of Transportation, Department of Energy. Okay, next ring out. You've not done work for the federal government, but you've done work for state governments. All right. You've
Mm-hmm.
not done public sector work at all. You've done commercial work, though. You've got a bunch of commercial clients and commercial projects, civilian, non-government type work. Okay, great. Next ring out, right? So start at the center of that bullseye with relevant customers to that customer that you're bidding on that work for, and then work your way out. Okay, so
Yeah.
that's what that bullseye is. So now we're going to start to cheat a little bit, because I love federal contracting for this slide for lots of reasons, but for this slide in particular. They tell you the answers to the test, that they're giving it to you. You just have to know what you're looking for.
Okay.
Keyword search, control F. Find in those government documents. It's going to be in the solicitation document. It's going to be in the RFP document. Sometimes, oftentimes they're called section L and section M, Lima and Mike.
Mm-hmm.
But you really want to look for instructions to offers and evaluation. Sometimes it's called evaluation factors or factors for evaluation. So sometimes the words are a little bit different, but you
Mm-hmm.
want to look for these key words, because instructions to offers is where they're telling you, I want a technical volume. In that technical volume, I want a subfactor talking about program management. I want a subfactor talking about certifications. The subfactor 1, not to exceed 5 pages. Subfactor 2, not to exceed 10 pages. I want a past performance section that's going to have 3 past performances that are within the past 5 years, recent and relevant experience. Provide the contract name, contract number, point of contact, boom, boom, boom. That's where, here's a fun one. Times New Roman font, 12-point font.
Really?
Margins 1 inch. I am not exaggerating.
Wow.
Sometimes they will say no color graphics. Sometimes they will say separate documents instead of just including everything in one PDF document. Sometimes they will say, they want each volume separate.
Mm-hmm.
And kind of think about that for a sec. Put yourself in the contracting officer's shoes. They're not just being a pain in the neck. Some are for sure. Let's set those aside, right? So the reason they're doing that is because first off, they've got a huge magnifying glass over them at all times, right? Because they're dealing with government, they're dealing with taxpayer dollars. So they've got this huge book of regulations and policies, the federal acquisition regulation that they've got to follow, right? So that's, kind of the second strike. And the third strike is they're getting maybe hundreds of responses from knuckleheads like you and me that are saying, hey, I can do that, right? And they've got to have some way to say, okay, we want to be fair. We want to make sure we're comparing apples to apples. So I've got to leave nothing to the imagination and specify every little nitnoid detail so that all of these things all these proposals, I can look at and evaluate the same way. So that's why they go through that. And then, like I said, they're giving you the answers to the tests. Section M is the evaluation factors. They're telling you, here's volume 1, volume 2, volume 3. We are going to weight or evaluate volume 1 over volume 2, and volume 1 and 2 are more important when combined than pricing, period. Right. So they're telling you how they're going to grade you. Sometimes they'll give you a scale and say, okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 5 being the top, and then we'll evaluate. Sometimes it's pass, fail. You either pass it or you don't. Often why they separate out those different sections and they say they want different, actual documents, actual PDF documents for each of those sections, is because when they go through the evaluation, the end user doesn't need to see pricing. I've seen some companies or some proposals where the contract officer will say, hey, don't include your company name in your technical volume. No reference to your company or any companies in your technical volume. Just your approach. Why? Because they're going to give that technical volume and all of the competition to the TEB, the Technical Evaluation Board. And those are end users. They don't need to worry about if they know Johnny's company is, Acme. They don't want to give favoritism to Acme, so they're keeping all those company names out of it. They don't want the end users worrying about pricing. That's not their job. They want the end users looking at, okay, does this person know what they're talking about? And is this plan that they've put together going to do what we need it to do? Right. So that's what they want them focused on. So when they give you those instructions, they give you those evaluation factors, pay attention. That's that 165 pages that lost them a huge proposal, right?
Right.
That's where it comes back into play. Details matter, and this is where they tell you the details. They're not hiding them. So what does that actually look like? Well, here's one. This is going to be in the in section L, and this is going to be in the instructions to offers. And this is kind of what that looks like. Not to exceed is NTE. Not to exceed 3 pages. They want the relevant past performance. Plan is, again, words matter. This is what they're calling the technical volume. So they want the work plan not to exceed 2 pages, and this is what they want you to include in it. And then section C here, this is new. Key personnel. Key personnel is something that sometimes they'll throw in. If there's 10, 20 different, people needed to do the job, whatever the job is, maybe the government's going to say, I want these 3 people identified as key personnel. And usually that's the top, either the most senior, like program manager, or the most senior technical expert. Because for key personnel, they're going to want to see the resumes of that human being that's going to take that position, right? It's just another way to, de-risk a solution. Sometimes they'll say 120 days. Sometimes they'll say, in this case, they say 49 days. That person that you put forward as key personnel has to stay on the job. That human being that you put their resume in, just for those key personnel, has to be the human being that's assigned to this job for at least the first 49 days of that job. Most
Okay.
cases, it's the first 120 days. So just keep that in mind.
All right.
Okay. So now let's focus on how am I doing on time? Okay, I'm good. So now let's take a look at pricing. This is a section unto itself, and there are people who just focus on the pricing and that's their expertise. But from a high level, pricing gets complicated by the government on the left side here. And this is the cost model. So if you've ever looked if you've built a business budget and you know how much you've got to pay to have your emails, and you know how much your printer paper costs and how much your electric utilities are, and all those things that cost to run a business, you usually commercial companies are just calling that overhead, right?
Mm-hmm.
What the government does is they break that overhead into a couple of other factors, and they call what we might call overhead, they call that indirect. They call that indirect rates. So what does it cost you to do your business? Okay. And that indirect rate, that big bucket of indirect rate, breaks down into overhead and G&A, general and administrative.
Okay.
G&A, general and administrative, just what it sounds like, that's what your company and my company and the dog groomer and the lawn care company and the painter and the IT company, that's what all of these companies have in common, right? So I need a website. I need email. I need printer paper. I need an administrative assistant, right? So all of those things are not associated with a project, but they're just to operate my business. Okay, so those are G&A. Overhead are things that you need in order to do the job that they're asking for, right? So those are overhead. And then cost basis are things that you're actually billing to the government. I could spend 3 or 4 hours just talking about this, but just to kind of overview it for you, that's what it is.
Okay.
The government, you have to make, you are not a non-for-profit organization. It's actually illegal to give the government something for free. They expect you to make a profit.
Okay.
In fact, they will have a competitive range. What does that mean? Before, way early in the process, when the government, even before they do their shopping around, the government's done this, whatever it is before, and they're going to estimate internally what they think it's going to take to do that job. It's called an independent government cost estimate. That IGCE is where the government says, okay, this is going to be a $150,000 job, or this is going to be a $15 million job. All right. So that is a line, whatever they think the job is going to cost. And then, depending on the contracting officer, they're going to go up 10% and down 10%, or up 20% and down 20%.
Mm-hmm.
That's the competitive range. So all of the companies that now submit bids for that job, for that project, are going to be pinpoints in that map, in that graph. And if they are inside that competitive range, that plus or minus, then they are okay. They're competitive. They're inside the competitive range.
Gotcha.
If on a $150,000 job, somebody bids $2 million, their proposal is going to get disqualified because it's outside of the competitive range.
Right.
Also, if somebody, sandbags it and bids, $1,000, they either are trying to give the government a lost leader, which you can't do in federal government, or they don't know what they're doing, and that's a risk. So their proposal also gets disqualified because they're outside of that competitive range. That's where this costing model comes in play. The other way to get to a price is look at what the competition's doing and then stick your pin in the map, right? So I recommend do both. Figure
How
out.
do you know how do you know what the competition is doing?
Well, you can go to a bunch of different sites. So gsaadvantage.gov is one site that you can look at. GSA Advantage government.gov, and that's like the Amazon.com for government.
So to show you what past contracts have been awarded at?
You can see what current companies' contracts are, thousands and thousands of companies.
Okay.
GSA is kind of like the safe. It really is kind of like Amazon.com for the government. And you
Okay.
can see what current companies' labor rates are. You can see what current companies' product pricing is for specific, part number level products. So you can see what the competition is, and you can see what their price points are. And if you're
Gotcha.
way outside of what they're doing, then you might want to consider, you might want to look at your pricing.
Correct. Gotcha.
All right, so those are the two different types. And like I said, on the left side, that pricing model that gets that is overseen by the IRS of this world, which is Defense Contract Audit Agency, DCAA. And they very specifically give these kinds of directions, right? So this gets super complicated. We're not going into a lot of detail on that today, but just to expose you to it, that's a thing, right? So when you start getting into that calculation, it does get a little bit wonky, but just understand that that's kind of that's a thing, especially when you're doing services pricing, professional services. So let's go back to evaluation factors. We're looking at that RFP. We're diving into the RFP. We did what Andy said, and we looked up, instructions to offers. We looked up evaluation factors, and now we're going into how are they picking the winner and the losers? Well, it's either going to be one or the other on this screen, and this is the only ways they pick. It's either going to be LPTA, lowest price technically acceptable, or best value. LPTA is when they take, again, companies inside that competitive range. They're going to only take those. Everybody else gets disqualified. They're going to rack and stack all the proposals that they get. Most expensive on the bottom, least expensive inside the competitive range, least expensive on top.
Yes.
They're going to open up and give the to the technical people, the TEB, the Technical Evaluation Board, those end users. They're going to give the proposal to the end users to decide if these guys know what they're talking about and they're technically acceptable, or they don't know what they're talking about and they're out, right?
Yeah.
So if they know what they're talking about and they're technically acceptable, they were top of the stack, their lowest price, they get the award. Everybody else gets, archived. If they're not technically acceptable, then they toss that proposal. They move on to the second least expensive, read that one. Again, good, get the award. Nope, toss, move on to the next one. So that's LPTA.
Gotcha.
Best value is in that evaluation factor when they say, technical is more important than pricing, or past performance is more important than this, that, the other. This is where they decide what's weighted more important. So you may have a more expensive proposal and still get the award, right? Because they valued your response in the technical section over your price, right? So those are the only two ways. When are they going to do that? Usually when it's Air Force One. This was one. Air Force One several years ago needed new refrigerators, chillers in the aircraft, right? So super important airplane, right? Air Force One flies the president around. We don't want any, we don't want to run down to Walmart. Nothing against Walmart. We don't want to run down to Walmart and get a refrigerator, for college dorm and shove it into the airplane. It's got to be, system specific, airplane certified, all this kind of stuff, right? So that's where the price, we don't really care that it's going to cost a whole bunch, but we really care that it's technically acceptable, right? So the technical approach was much more important than the price. All right, so that's kind of example for that.
Sure.
All right, so what does that actually look like? Again, let me show you some real examples here. So again, if you just keyword search that evaluation factor, they're telling you that the evaluation is going to be used, and then down here they say, okay, technical and past performance when combined are significantly more important than price when being evaluated. Fancy legal jargon, but now you know what it means, right? That's the kind of thing that I immediately look for every single proposal. Because as a business owner, whereas over here, like LPTA, if you know it's going to be lowest price, you need to check the box on the technical volume. Don't waste a whole lot of time on painting a pretty picture for them there, because it's, check the box. You got it,
Right.
be technically acceptable, but you really need to sharpen your pencil on the pricing side.
Right.
Whereas on the other side, that the right side here, that's where you need to really hone in on your technical, right? So it depends. Um, and then if they use different words here, but it's the same kind of thing. Government will compare quotes one to another, evaluate requirements based on quote for sustainability contractors, blah blah blah. So they're just giving you some different information, quoting the best suited services to address any remaining issues. So best suited services is just another way of saying best value, right? So they're not
Mhm.
using those exact words, but it's in there. All right, let's take a look and see if we've got a couple minutes here. So we can look at a live one if you'd like to. Just pick what your industry is so I can pull you up and we can see if we can find some opportunities to take a look at here. I'm doing what we did in part 2.
Mm.
I'm
Yeah,
logging in.
yeah. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, I'm logging into sam.gov
Mm-hmm.
and doing my credentialing here. And my computer catches up with me. There we go. You were going to ask?
Well, my background is retail and real estate, but I'm going the prime route, which means, more certain services,
Okay.
like landscaping, snow plow removal, those type, tree cutting, where I can try to get, I think that's the easiest and more, I wouldn't say easiest, but
Sure.
the way to get my feet wet in that. I don't have a business per se. Um, so I don't have yeah, something simple. Yeah, I would say
We'll
simple,
just
but
use we'll just use that as kind of a touch point. So like we went into detail on in part 2, I'm just going to kind of fast forward through it. I clicked
mm-hmm,
on contract opportunities. I'm going to do edit entity. My apologies. I want contract opportunities. All right, and now I'm going to skip over that. I'm going to do my little secret here with the custom date. Let's say today is that. It takes me a couple of days to put a proposal together. So I'm going to say things that are coming out, or due, I should say, from January 1st through, let's give it a couple months.
mm-hmm,
Let's say to May. Don't care about updates. I'm going to do notice type. I'm going to look at sources sought. I'm going to look at pre-solicitation, combined, solicitation, or consolidated, and then combined. I'm going to leave PSC and Nike's code empty because we're looking for a keyword search. I don't want to, filter myself too much. I'm going to
mm-hmm.
leave set aside codes empty. I'm going to leave past performance empty. I'm going to leave contract awardee empty and status defaults to active. So I'm going to leave that alone. All right.
Okay.
So with snow, I'm going to make sure my keywords caught here. I can see that down here. If not, I'm going to type those in. And I can
Mm-hmm.
see there's 7 results right off the bat, 7 results.
Mm-hmm.
So let's take a look. Let's just take a look at the top one here.
Okay.
All right, I want one that's an actual solicitation so I can show you what the documents actually look like. So if this isn't, we're gonna go back. Okay, so it's services. So they're not looking for product. It's the
Mm-hmm.
VA, so I can tell it's Veterans Affairs. I can tell when it's due. Okay, so it's due on January 4th.
So I
It's
guess original date was the 20th, so that means they didn't get enough offers.
Well, it could mean a lot of different things, right? It could mean that somebody asked for an extension, which you're always allowed to do. It doesn't mean they have to give it to you. But you can always say before it's due, hey, ma'am, sir, it's taking longer for XYZ reason. I request a 2-week extension.
Okay.
So if they've already got 15 offers, they're probably not going to give you an extension. But if
Right.
they're kind of struggling to get people interested in it, then they're going to give you the extension. Or if it's a legit reason, whatever. So it's
Gotcha.
at the discretion of the contracting officer. Since we did a keyword search, I'm paying, and this is, say this is my type of business, I'm
Mm-hmm.
paying attention to the NICE code that those contract officers are using, right? So I'm
Okay.
going to just kind of keep that in mind. Description, they don't really, okay, so it looks like they updated because there were questions and they answered vendors or companies, right? So that's us. All right, so what I see here, this type of lingo
Mm-hmm.
is the contract note. That's the notice ID, right? So that
Mm-hmm.
keys into me that's what the contract number is. This 0001 tells me that's an amendment, right?
Okay.
So there's probably, yeah. So this is the original document, and it
Mm-hmm.
was December 13. And then it looks like, 9 days later or so, they posted an update, and that's the amendment. All right.
Mm-hmm.
And past performance evaluation questionnaire. So they're giving you a document, a survey that they want you to send to your previous customers so that they can send it out back to the contract officer. So it's an evaluation
Mm-hmm.
questionnaire, right?
Gotcha.
So that wage determination, this is for labor rates, map. So it's telling you, they're going to show you where the work to be done is,
Mm-hmm.
road area priorities. So these are all details associated with that job.
Mm-hmm.
Let's look real quick at the Word document here. This is going to be where all those instructions are. And I'm going to do what I said I was. I'm going to keyword search instructions to offers and evaluation factors.
Mm-hmm.
Just going to show you one real quick, and looks like that'll put us right at time. If Word will cooperate with me today. All right, so this is this is very, very standard, right? So this form is either 1449 or an SF33. Don't
Mm-hmm.
worry about that. There's not going to be a test later. It's just the format. So don't get scared off by this. There's a lot of information in here, but again,
Mm-hmm.
that's kind of a separate class. As you start going through this, you can see sometimes they've got table content, sometimes they don't.
Mm-hmm.
See, okay, statement of work, page 5, that's where they are. Price schedule, so they're giving me the format they want the pricing in, and then the instructions to offers right there, 37. So I'm
Mm-hmm.
gonna hop down because that's what we're talking about today. I'm gonna hop down to 37. Okay, so instructions, they're telling you what information to include. Submission of offers include, this information here, 1, 2, 3, 4, all the way to 7, 9. Yep. So all this stuff, they're telling you what to include. Period of acceptance. If your quote is valid, right? So that's what they mean by that. How valid, how long is your quote valid for? Yeah. So these are all the instructions. And then for me, I'm going to keep looking for some evaluation, and I'm going to do a search for evaluation. That's going to be in there somewhere. There's a bunch of them. Okay. So let's go. There we go. Okay. So the overall evaluated price. All right. There we go. All right. So just playing around with it a little bit, and magically I did the keyword search, 41 results. So even worst case, if I've got to, look at each one of them, I'm going to get to something that looks like this.
Mm-hmm.
And we pulled this up real time. So, I can't can this, right? So
You're right.
this is real. This is live. Quoters, they said vendors before, but quoters. So again, give flexibility with the words they use. This quote shall consist of 3 factors. They're calling them factors, not volumes: technical, past, and price. So they're not talking about business, but there's what it is. Then they're
Mm-hmm.
telling you, okay, here's what they want to see in 30 pages or less. in your technical volume, right? So boom, boom, boom. You got to answer those things.
Mm-hmm.
Here's what they want to see in past performance. The offerer shall seek at least, that's them, the government offerer shall seek three. Well, no, that's a little weird. The offerer is you, but they're kind of worded it funny. Shall seek at least 3 recent and relevant within the last 3 years. So they want 3 examples within the past 3 years with similar, same or similar services, right? I said size and scope, but they're saying similar, same and similar.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and then the past performance questionnaire. So they give you the document for the past performance questionnaire that they want you to send out. All right, and then factor 3, up to the government, total price. All pricing will be evaluated on total price basis, inclusive of option years. And there's going to be, here we go, evaluation approach. There it is, just below, next page. Evaluation approach, competitive, outline, boom, boom, boom. And yeah, they're not saying LPTA, so this is going to be a best value. Yeah, and then they're telling you what the factors are. And then they're going to show the weighting somewhere. But like I said, they look like this, right? So look for the instructions, look for the evaluation factors, make sure that you're answering the mail, make sure you're, doing what they say and submitting the proposal in the manner in which they tell you to. All right.
Right.
Keith, I appreciate you. Thank you for joining. I think you've done all 3, so you get the gold star. Feel free to join future ones, and good luck to you, and look forward to hearing some results from you.
Thank you for your time today. We hope this workshop was instructive and informative. Please find additional accredited courses and other support services on our website at nc-rgc.com